Good afternoon, Representative.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Markosik, and distinguished staff and members of the Appropriations Committee. If I could just mention for a moment the Department of Public Welfare budget. I heard from one of my distinguished colleagues with regards to the cut in the Department of Public Welfare. Certainly, one could look at the enormous numbers in DPW and conclude that a reduction of 0.75% is highly unlikely to result in some of the dire predictions that we've heard here. In fact, a very good case could be made that a reduction of 0.75% is probably not deep enough in the DPW budget with regard to highly publicized cases of abuse and fraud and waste. Before I drove in this morning, I did my customary jog. We have a track next to our house, and we have a number of intersections with our neighbors, a bus driver, a senior, a retiree, and a businessman. And I heard one familiar theme from each of them. They wanted to see an end to tax and borrow and spend in Harrisburg. We've heard a bit about compassion today, and raising taxes on seniors and pushing senior citizens and those with a limited ability to pay out of their homes is far from being compassionate. Reducing the size and the cost of governance is what my constituents back home in the place that I call Berks County are interested in. I see some bright spots in the budget as a former correctional officer and as a 20-plus year emergency medical technician. I'm encouraged when I see space made in the budget for 100 additional state troopers. I am concerned, obviously, as many of you are here, as we grapple with funding for infrastructure and transportation. But I'd like to make a suggestion to not only my constituent community, but the legislature and the administration, that before we start talking about tolls and taxes and fees, that we ought to look at ferreting out waste. We ought to look at reductions in the size and the cost of government. And as I talk to average people in the street, in the community, in my small town of Moton, they're enormously encouraged that we're looking at right-sizing government. Now, we're going to have disagreements, and there ought to be a spirited debate on where the belt tightening ought to come from. I'm an Act 48 certified teacher. I've been a guest teacher in the public schools. I'm a product of the public education system. The first college I went to was a community college. The last college I went to with some EMT training was a community college. I graduated from Kutztown State University, and so I certainly think there is a need to recalibrate and take a harder look at the funding with regards to education. While we're dealing with the subject of schools, and it's come up in this General Assembly and certainly in the governor's speech, there is a need for mandate relief on the personnel side, on the transportation side, on the building side, if we're looking for efficacy of cost savings with regard to our schools. I don't want to steal any of Mario Scavella's thunder on property tax, but might I add that the property taxes in Berks County as a percent of home value are one of the highest in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Mario may have the ultimate title, but in the United States of America, as I've looked at 792 counties with populations of 65,000 people or more, and I compare our property taxes not only in a raw number in Berks County, but as a percent of income, because I'm concerned about my constituents' ability to pay. This General Assembly and this administration needs to deal with runaway, out-of-control property taxes. Because at the end of the day, whatever conversation we have about transportation, about education, or any other subject are muted by the reality that every day in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, your constituents and my constituents are put on the curbside. And our constitutional rights don't mean a whole lot when we're sitting next to the street in a pile of boxes. And so I encourage this General Assembly to take on the issue that most of my constituents are talking about on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.